Tonight, we journey to a place where time moved slowly, where the work of human hands sought to defy mortality itself. We're traveling back more than 3,000 years to the banks of the Nile, where the art of preservation was both a sacred duty and an everyday craft.
Tonight, we journey to a place where time moved slowly, where the work of human hands sought to defy mortality itself. We're traveling back more than 3,000 years to the banks of the Nile, where the art of preservation was both a sacred duty and an everyday craft. This is the story of the embalmers of ancient Egypt, the quiet practitioners who transformed death into something beautiful, something eternal. Before we begin, take a moment to settle in. Adjust your pillows, dim the lights, and let the modern world fade away. If you enjoy these journeys into history, a gentle like or subscribe helps others find this peaceful space, but only if it feels right to you. Now, let the story unfold at its own pace, like the slow current of the ancient Nile itself. The sun rises over the western bank of the Nile, casting long shadows across the desert sands. In the distance, the limestone cliffs glow with the first light of morning. Here, away from the bustling markets and temple courtyards of the Living, stands a structure known as the Per Nefer, the House of Beauty, though some called it the Wabeh, the place of purification. This is where transformation happened, where the journey to eternity truly began. Inside these walls, the air carries a complex mixture of scents. There's the sharp, clean smell of natron, a naturally occurring salt harvested from dried lake beds. Mixed with this are the warm, resinous notes of frankincense and myrrh, imported at great expense from the distant lands of Punt. Cedar oil adds its woody undertone, while cinnamon and cassia contribute their subtle spice. These aren't unpleasant odors, despite what you might imagine. To those who worked here, these were the fragrances of the sacred, the aromatic signatures of their holy work. The embalmers arrive in the early morning, as they do every day. They're not priests in the traditional sense, though their work is deeply religious. Some are hereditary practitioners, learning the craft from fathers and grandfathers who learned it from their fathers before them. Others apprenticed into the profession, drawn by the steady work and the respect it commanded. They wear simple white linen kilts, the same practical garment worn by workers throughout Egypt, though theirs are marked with the occasional stain of their trade, faint discolorations that no amount of washing in the river can completely remove. The work begins with ritual purification. Water is poured over the hands from clay vessels, and prayers are murmured to Anubis, the jackal-headed god who presides over mummification. Anubis is everywhere in this place. His image appears on the walls in painted relief, his form cast in small bronze statues that sit in niches, his presence invoked in every stage of the process. The embalmers don't fear Anubis. He's their patron, their guide, the divine overseer of their craft. On a low table in the center of the main room lies the subject of today's work, a person who departed from life, perhaps only yesterday. The embalmers approach with reverence, not horror. Death is familiar to them, not as something terrible, but as a transition they facilitate with skill and care. They've seen countless bodies, handled them with these same gentle hands. transformed them through knowledge passed down through centuries. The chief embalmer, a man of middle years with skilled hands and tired eyes, begins the assessment. Every body is different, and the treatment varies according to the wishes and wealth of the family. There are different levels of service in the embalmer's trade, just as there are in any profession. For the wealthiest, the full treatment spanning 70 days. For those of more modest means, a simplified process taking perhaps 40 days. For the poor, the most basic preservation, little more than cleansing and wrapping. Tonight, we're observing the preparation of someone of comfortable means, someone whose family has saved for years to afford proper treatment. The first step is washing. Clean water from the Nile is brought in large jars, and the body is carefully bathed. This isn't a quick rinse, but a thorough, gentle cleansing, treating the deceased with the same care one might give to a living person. The water is mixed with natron, that miraculous salt that forms the foundation of their craft. Natron is Egypt's gift to eternity, found in abundance in the Wadi Natron, a valley northwest of Cairo. It's a mixture of sodium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate, along with small amounts of sodium chloride and sodium sulfate. The embalmers don't know these chemical names, but they know its properties intimately. They know it draws out moisture. They know it prevents decay. They know it's been doing so for longer than anyone can remember. After the washing comes a procedure that requires both steady hands and anatomical knowledge. The embalmers must remove the internal organs, for these are what decay first, what would compromise the preservation of the whole. The process is methodical, almost meditative in its careful execution. Using a bronze hook with a curved end, the chief embalmer carefully extracts the brain through the nasal passages. This requires patience and a delicate touch, working incrementally, bit by bit, until the cranial cavity is empty. The brain, interestingly, is not preserved. The ancient Egyptians didn't recognize it as the seat of consciousness or identity. To them, the heart was what mattered. The heart was where thought and feeling and personality resided. The chest and abdomen are next. A small incision is made along the left side of the body, just large enough for a hand to work through. The embalmer's assistant holds the skin aside, while the chief embalmer reaches inside with practiced confidence. One by one, the organs are removed, the liver heavy and dark, the lungs which must be carefully extracted from the ribcage, the stomach and intestines which are treated with particular care, the kidneys nestled deep in the back. Each organ is placed in a separate basin of natron solution, beginning its own process of preservation. The heart, however, remains. This is crucial. The heart will be needed in the afterlife, specifically during the weighing of the heart ceremony, when the deceased stands before Osiris and the heart is balanced against the feather of Me'at, the feather of truth and justice. Without the heart, there can be no judgment, no progression to the field of reeds, the Egyptian paradise. So the heart stays, resting in its proper place within the chest, a small anchor of identity in the preserved shell of the body. Now begins the longest phase of the work, the desiccation that will take 40 days. The body is covered completely in natron, not the solution used for washing, but dry natron salt, mounded over every surface until the form beneath is barely visible. More natron is packed into the body cavity through the incision. The embalmers know from generations of experience exactly how much is needed, how to arrange it for optimal drying. how to ensure every part of the body is in contact with the desiccating salt. The covered body is left on a slightly tilted table, angled, so that any liquids drawn out by the natron can drain away into channels carved into the table's surface. These channels lead to a collection point where the fluids drip slowly into clay vessels placed below. This isn't a rapid process. The moisture leaves the body incrementally, day by day, as the natron performs its slow work of preservation. During these 40 days, the embalmers check on their charge regularly. They adjust the natron, replacing any that has become saturated with moisture. They ensure the drying is happening evenly, that no area is being neglected. They maintain the proper temperature in the room, opening and closing shutters to manage the flow of air, using braziers to warm the space when the desert night brings its surprising chill. While the body dries, the removed organs undergo their own treatment. After their initial soaking in natron solution, they're dried, using the same salt. Once desiccated, they'll be wrapped individually in linen and placed in canopic jars, special vessels dedicated to their protection. These jars are themselves works of art, carved from limestone or alabaster, each with a lid representing one of the 4 sons of Horus. Imseti, with his human head, guards the liver. Happy, the baboon-headed son, protects the lungs. Duamutef, who has the head of a jackal, watches over the stomach. And Kebesenuef, falcon-headed, safeguards the intestines. The workshop during these 40 days has a particular rhythm. Embalmers work on multiple bodies at different stages of preparation. While one body sits covered in natron, requiring only periodic checking, another might be in the washing stage, and yet another in the final wrapping. The embalmers move between their charges with practiced efficiency, each knowing their role, each understanding the sacred nature of their work. They're not wealthy men, these embalmers, but they're comfortable. They're paid in grain, in oil, in cloth, just like any other craftsman. The wealthier families provide generous compensation, ensuring their loved ones receive the finest treatment. This payment system has remained stable for generations. A chief embalmer might receive enough grain to feed his family for a month from a single well-paying job, along with measures of oil for cooking and cloth for clothing. It's steady work, reliable work, for death comes to all eventually. And most Egyptian families, even those of modest means, save throughout their lives to afford proper burial. After 40 days, when the embalmer judges the desiccation complete, the body is removed from its bed of natron. What emerges is dramatically transformed. The flesh has taken on a dark, leather-like quality. The body has lost perhaps 75% of its original weight. The skin clings tightly to bones, and the features have become sharp and distinct. But this is exactly what the embalmers sought. This is a body prepared for eternity, a form that will not decay, that will endure in the dry climate of the tomb for thousands of years. Now comes the washing again, this time removing all traces of the natron salt. The body is cleansed with water mixed with palm wine and spices, giving it a pleasant aroma. The embalmers work with gentle hands, treating the dried flesh carefully, for it's now somewhat fragile. They massage scented oils into the skin, softening it slightly, returning some small measure of suppleness. These oils are luxury items: frankincense, myrrh, cedar oil, cassia, juniper oil, each with its own properties, its own connection to the divine. The abdominal cavity, empty now except for the heart, is packed with linen bags containing more aromatic materials. Myrrh, cinnamon, sometimes even sawdust mixed with resin. This packing fills out the body, restoring some of the natural contours lost during desiccation. The embalmers are artists in their way, concerned not just with preservation, but with appearance. They want the deceased to look their best for eternity. The incision on the left side is now closed. In wealthier burials, a plate of metal, gold, or bronze, inscribed with the protective eye of Horus, is placed over the cut. For those of more moderate means, the incision might simply be covered with linen and resin. The goal is protection, preventing anything from entering the body cavity, maintaining the sanctity of the preserved form. And then begins the wrapping, the process that will take days to complete. The embalmers don't rush this. Each finger and toe is wrapped individually, careful strips of linen wound around them, secured with a dab of resin. Then the hands, each wrapped so that the individual fingers remain distinguishable. Then the feet. The arms and legs receive the same treatment, layer upon layer of linen, each layer separated from the next by a thin coating of resin that will harden, binding the wrappings together. The linen used is usually old household linen. Repurposed sheets and clothing, donated by the family, or purchased from those who collect such materials. It's torn into strips of varying widths, from narrow bands for fingers to broad swaths for the torso. The quantity of linen used is considerable. A fully wrapped mummy might use several hundred square meters of cloth. The accumulation of many layers, each contributing to the protection of the body beneath. Between the layers of wrapping, the embalmers place amulets, small magical objects meant to protect the deceased and grant them power in the afterlife. These might include the Djed pillar, symbolizing stability and the backbone of Osiris. The Tayet knot, also called the knot of Isis, offering the goddess's protection. The heart scarab, often made of greenstone inscribed with spells from the Book of the Dead, specifically chapter 30b, which prevents the heart from bearing witness against the deceased during judgment. The Wedjat eye, the eye of Horus, offering wholeness and healing. Each amulet is placed with intention, positioned according to long-established tradition, accompanied by whispered prayers. The head receives special attention. The face is often covered with a cartonnage mask, a formed piece made from layers of linen and plaster, painted with idealized features. Even those who cannot afford elaborate masks receive careful wrapping, with special attention paid to protecting the eyes, nose, and mouth. The embalmers understand that identity resides in the face, and preserving that identity, or at least the structure that held it, is crucial. As the wrapping progresses upward from the feet to the head, prayers are recited. These aren't necessarily elaborate spells, sometimes just simple invocations to the gods, requests for protection, affirmations of the deceased's worthiness. The embalmers have memorized many of these prayers through years of repetition. They speak them in low voices, rhythmic and soothing, part of the workshop's ambient sound, along with the occasional clink of resin jars and the soft rustle of linen. The final layers of wrapping encase the entire body, binding the individual parts into a unified whole. Broad sheets of linen are wound around and around, secured at intervals with horizontal and vertical bands, creating the classic mummy appearance familiar to us today. More resin is poured over these outer layers, soaking into the linen, hardening as it dries, creating a protective shell. The whole process, from the initial washing to this final wrapping, has taken 70 days, the traditional period of mourning in ancient Egypt. During this time, the family has been observing their own rituals, preparing the tomb, arranging for the funeral ceremony, commissioning the canopic jars, the coffin, the shabti figures that will serve as magical servants in the afterlife. Now, on the 70th day, the embalmer's work is complete. The wrapped body, no longer really a body but a mummy, a sa in the ancient Egyptian language, is ready for the opening of the mouth ceremony, ready for placement in its coffin, ready to begin its journey to eternity. The embalmers clean their workshop, washing their tools in natron solution, purifying the space for the next body that will inevitably arrive, for their work is never truly done. But who are these embalmers when they're not engaged in their sacred craft? They're men like any others in ancient Egypt. They have families waiting at home, children who run to greet them at day's end, wives who manage households and prepare meals. They live in villages near the necropolis, modest homes of mud brick with flat roofs where families sleep during hot summer nights. Their children play the same games as other Egyptian children, rolling hoops, playing with balls made of papyrus, engaging in mock battles with toy weapons. The embalmers' sons often follow their fathers into the profession, beginning as young boys by running errands, fetching water, preparing materials. They gradually learn the craft through observation and practice, starting with simpler tasks and progressing to more complex procedures as their skills develop. The embalmers eat the same foods as their neighbors: bread made from emmer wheat, onions and leeks, the occasional fish from the Nile, dates, and figs when in season. Beer is their daily beverage, a thick, nutritious brew, quite different from modern beer, more like liquid bread, providing calories and hydration. On special occasions, there might be duck or goose, or the prized dried meat that keeps well in the Egyptian climate. They worship the same gods as other Egyptians, though naturally they have a special devotion to Anubis. In their homes, they keep small shrines with figurines of the jackal god, leaving offerings of bread and beer, burning incense, reciting prayers of thanks for the gift of their profession, and prayers for continued skill in their work. Their days follow the rhythm of the Egyptian calendar. The 3 seasons, the days of festival, the days of rest. They observe the festivals of the gods like everyone else, joining in the public celebrations, watching the processions, drinking and feasting with their neighbors. The mystery of their profession doesn't isolate them socially. If anything, it grants them respect, for everyone understands the importance of proper burial, the necessity of their craft for achieving eternal life. To understand the embalmer's work, we must understand what ancient Egyptians believed about death and the afterlife. Death wasn't an ending, but a transformation, a passage from one form of existence to another. The physical body, the cat, needed to be preserved because it served as an anchor for the other aspects of a person, the spiritual elements that survived death. The car was the life force, a sort of spiritual double created at birth. After death, the car needed sustenance, which is why food offerings were left in tombs, and why images of food were painted on tomb walls. The car couldn't physically eat, but it could absorb the spiritual essence of offerings. The BA was often depicted as a bird with a human head, representing personality, and the ability to move between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. The Bey could leave the tomb, travel to the land of the living, but it needed to return to the body at night. If the body decayed beyond recognition, the Bey might become lost, unable to find its way back, which would be catastrophic for the deceased's eternal existence. The Akh was the transformed, glorified spirit that resulted from the successful joining of the Ka and Ba after death. The Akh was what dwelt in the field of reeds, the paradise of Osiris, enjoying eternal life. But achieving Akh status required proper burial, correct preservation of the body, and successful navigation of the trials of the underworld. This is why the Embalmers' work mattered so profoundly. They weren't simply preventing decay, they were facilitating spiritual transformation. They were providing the deceased with the physical foundation needed for eternal existence. Every step in their process, from the removal of organs to the placement of amulets to the recitation of prayers, served this higher purpose. The Egyptians believed the journey after death was complex. The deceased would travel through the Duat, the underworld, encountering various challenges, various demons and guardians that must be appeased or overcome. Knowledge of the correct spells provided by the funerary texts was essential. The deceased would eventually reach the Hall of Two Truths, where Osiris presided over judgment. In this hall, the heart of the deceased was placed on a scale, balanced against the feather of Ma'at. If the heart was light, unburdened by sin, the person was judged worthy and granted eternal life in the field of reeds. If the heart was heavy with wrongdoing, it would tip the scales, and the heart would be devoured by Amet, a composite creature, part lion, part hippopotamus, part crocodile. This was true death, final and absolute, the destruction of all possibility of eternal existence. The Embalmers understood that their work was the necessary first step in this journey. They provided the vehicle for the soul's travels, maintained the anchor point for the spiritual elements, ensured that the physical form would endure long enough for the deceased to achieve their transformation and judgment. Back in the workshop, the rhythm continues day after day, year after year. The Embalmers have seen all types of bodies pass through their hands. The very old, who died peacefully in their sleep, their bodies already thin and worn by a long life. The young cut down by disease or accident, their preservation somehow more poignant. The wealthy, whose families spare no expense, demanding the finest oils, the most elaborate wrappings. The poor, whose families scrape together what they can, hoping the gods will recognize the love and effort, even if the materials are simple. Each body tells a story, if you know how to read it. The Embalmer's experienced eyes can see evidence of a life's work in the patterns of muscle, the wear on joints, the particular calluses that mark a scribe's fingers or a farmer's hands. They see evidence of disease, the ravages of age, the violence of accidents. But they don't judge. They simply do their work, performing their craft with the same care for the humble as for the exalted. The workshop has its own hierarchy. The chief embalmer makes the critical decisions, performs the most delicate operations, knows all the prayers and rituals. His assistants handle the preparatory work, the heavy lifting, the cleaning. There are specialists too, men who focus on particular aspects of the process. Those skilled at the intricate wrapping, those knowledgeable about specific prayers, those who prepare the aromatics and oils. Apprentices move through the space, learning by watching and doing. They start by cleaning, by bringing water, by preparing the natron. Gradually, they're allowed to participate more directly, first perhaps helping with the washing, then learning to wrap fingers and toes, eventually progressing to more complex tasks. It takes years to become a skilled embalmer, years of observation and practice, and memorization of prayers. The tools of the trade are simple but effective. Bronze hooks of various sizes for extracting brain tissue, bronze knives for the abdominal incision, wooden paddles for mixing resin, clay jars of every size for holding oil, water, natron solution, linen in seemingly endless quantities, braziers for heating resin until it becomes liquid enough to pour, stone grinding pallets for preparing powdered ingredients. Everything has its place, everything has its purpose, refined over centuries of practice. The work of embalmers follows the seasonal patterns of Egyptian life. The inundation season, when the Nile floods and covers the farmland, is often a busier time. People who died during the previous months and whose bodies were stored awaiting treatment are now processed. Families who earned income from the harvest can now afford to pay for embalming services. The growing season brings different patterns. Fewer deaths, perhaps, as food becomes more plentiful after the harvest, as the climate is neither too hot nor too cold. The embalmers use this time to replenish supplies, to make trips to the Natron Valley, to negotiate with merchants for imported aromatics. The harvest season is physically demanding for all Egyptians, and occasionally this brings accidents. People injured during the intensive labor of gathering crops, bringing them to the embalmer's door. But mostly life continues in its steady pattern, people living and dying according to the natural rhythm of things, and the embalmers maintaining their patient craft through all seasons. The workshop itself changes with the seasons too. During the hot months, the shutters are opened wide to allow air to circulate, and braziers are used sparingly. The heat aids in the desiccation process, and bodies dry more quickly. During cooler months, the shutters are closed more often, braziers keep the space warm, and the drying process takes a bit longer but proceeds just as effectively. Let's talk about the practical matter of cost. For even sacred work must be paid for. As mentioned earlier, there are different tiers of service, and most families know from the time they're young what level they can likely afford. The highest tier, what we might call the royal or noble treatment, is extraordinarily expensive. It includes the full 70 days, the use of the finest imported oils and aromatics, elaborate wrapping with amulets of gold and precious stones, decorative cartonnage masks covered in gold leaf, multiple ornate coffins, a decorated tomb. Only the wealthiest families, the nobility, high-ranking priests, and successful merchants can afford this level of service. The middle tier, which most successful craftsmen, minor officials, and prosperous farmers might afford, still includes the full 70-day treatment, the careful removal and preservation of organs, good quality oils and wrappings, a painted cartonnage mask, a solid wooden coffin, and a decent tomb. This is what we're observing in our story tonight. A family that has saved and planned and wants the best they can provide for their departed. The lower tier is more basic, but still respectful. The body is washed and packed in natron for a shorter period, perhaps 30 days. The organs might be removed through a shorter process or simply dissolved using juniper oil injected into the body cavity. The wrapping is simpler, using less linen, fewer amulets. The burial is in a shared tomb or a simple pit grave, but the intention is the same: to provide what protection and preservation is possible with limited means. For the very poor, those with almost nothing, there's still a basic service. The body is washed, wrapped in whatever cloth can be obtained, and placed in the sand of the desert. The dry sand itself acts as a preservative, and many naturally mummified bodies from earliest times, before the invention of formal embalming, survive because of this natural desiccation. The embalmers know this, and sometimes advise poor families that a simple desert burial can be almost as effective as expensive treatment, that the gods recognize the heart's intention as much as the richness of materials. Payment is negotiated at the beginning, when the family first comes to the workshop. The chief embalmer discusses what they can afford, what services they desire, what compromises might be made. Perhaps slightly fewer oils, but the full 70 days. Perhaps a simpler mask, but good quality wrappings. It's a conversation marked by respect on both sides, the embalmers understanding the emotional weight of the moment, the families grateful that these skilled practitioners will care for their loved one. Payment typically comes in installments, some at the beginning when the body is received, more at the midpoint, around the 40th day, the final payment when the mummy is complete and ready for burial. Families sometimes pay in grain, in beer, in oil, in cloth, whatever valuable goods they can provide. The embalmers accept these goods and trade them as needed for the materials they require, for imported aromatics from distant lands, for fine linen from the specialized weavers, for the services of craftsmen who make canopic jars and coffins. The embalmers don't work in isolation. They're part of a larger community of death professionals, all serving the great enterprise of Egyptian burial. There are the tomb workers, the skilled artisans who carve and decorate burial chambers, who paint the walls with scenes from the Book of the Dead, who ensure the physical space is ready to receive the deceased. There are the coffin makers, carpenters who shape sycamore wood into anthropoid coffins, who paint them with protective spells and images of the gods, who ensure each coffin is properly sized and well made. There are the sculptors who carve canopic jars from alabaster or limestone, who create ushabti figures, the magical servant statues that will perform labor for the deceased in the afterlife. There are the professional mourners, women who are hired to lament at funerals, to wail and tear their hair and throw dust on themselves in traditional expressions of grief. Their performances help the family's grief find expression, validate the importance of the loss, fulfill the social expectations of proper mourning. There are the priests who perform the funeral ceremonies, who conduct the opening of the mouth ritual that reanimates the mummy's senses, allowing it to eat, drink, see, hear, and speak in the afterlife. These priests know the complex spells and procedures required, own the special ceremonial tools, understand the timing and sequence of actions. There are the sellers of grave goods, merchants who specialize in funerary equipment, who can provide everything from simple clay pots to elaborate furniture, from basic food offerings to precious jewelry. Families visit these merchants in the months before burial, selecting what they can afford, what they believe their loved one will need for the afterlife journey. All these professionals know each other, interact regularly, depend on each other's expertise. The embalmers might recommend a particular coffin maker known for beautiful work at reasonable prices. The tomb workers might suggest which priests are most careful in their ritual performances. The community supports itself, all united in the common purpose of serving the dead and their surviving families. Despite the routine nature of their work, the embalmers never lose sight of its sacred dimension. Every body they handle was a person, someone who loved and was loved, who had hopes and fears, who contributed to their community in their own way. The embalmers honor this. They don't become callous or indifferent. The work demands respect, and they give it freely. There are small rituals throughout each day. Prayers upon entering the workshop in the morning. Purification before beginning any new procedure. Words spoken over each body at each stage of preparation. These aren't elaborate ceremonies but simple acknowledgements of the sacred nature of what they're doing. A few words to Anubis, thanking him for guidance. A prayer for the deceased, asking the gods to look favorably upon them. A moment of silence before making the first cut, recognizing the responsibility of what they're about to do. The embalmers also maintain their own spiritual practice outside the workshop. They observe purification regularly, bathing in the Nile, wearing clean linen. They avoid certain foods on certain days according to religious custom. They participate in festivals and temple ceremonies. They make offerings at shrines. They live their own lives with an awareness of mortality, of the importance of Ma'at, the cosmic principle of truth, justice, and order, of living a life that their own hearts will be proud of when they too face judgment. This spiritual awareness doesn't make them somber or grim. Egyptian religion valued joy, celebrated life even while acknowledging death. The embalmers laugh with their colleagues, tell jokes, sing songs while they work. They enjoy good food and drink, cherish time with family, appreciate the pleasures of existence. But underlying everything is an awareness that life is temporary, that the work of their hands helps others transcend that temporality, that they serve something greater than themselves. The embalmers are links in a chain stretching back into the mists of time. The techniques they use were refined over thousands of years, passed from generation to generation, each adding small innovations while respecting the core practices. When they teach their sons and apprentices, they're not just sharing practical skills, but transmitting a sacred tradition. They tell stories of legendary embalmers from the past. Men whose skill was so great that their work became famous, whose mummies were said to be perfect, whose prayers were particularly powerful. They speak of the first embalmers, mythical figures who learned the craft from Anubis himself, who prepared the body of Osiris after his murder by Set, who discovered the secrets of preservation through divine instruction. These stories serve a purpose beyond entertainment. They connect current practitioners to the sacred origins of their craft, remind them that they're part of something ancient and holy, encourage them to maintain the highest standards in their work. When an embalmer carefully places an amulet or perfectly wraps a finger, he's not just following procedure, he's honoring all the embalmers who came before, maintaining their standards, ensuring the tradition continues. The continuity of tradition extends to the materials as well. Natron has always come from the same valley northwest of what will one day be Cairo. The techniques for extracting and preparing it have been known for millennia. Certain aromatics have trade routes that have existed for centuries. Merchants who specialize in bringing frankincense and myrrh from the south, cedar oil from the north. The linen is woven on looms using techniques unchanged for generations. Even the layout of the workshop reflects ancient patterns. The pernefa is oriented in a particular way in relation to the rising sun, to the direction of the sacred west where the dead reside. The placement of different stations within the workshop follows traditional arrangements. There's comfort in this continuity, a sense that everything is being done the right way, the way it has always been done, the way blessed by the gods. Not every body that comes to the embalmers is in ideal condition. Sometimes death has been violent and the body shows evidence of trauma. Sometimes disease has ravaged the flesh, leaving it already compromised. Sometimes the body has been kept too long before being brought to the workshop, and early decomposition has begun. The embalmers adapt their techniques to these challenges, using their experience and knowledge to achieve the best preservation possible under the circumstances. Bodies that have been damaged require special attention. Wounds must be cleaned and filled. Missing parts must be compensated for in the wrapping. Extra resin might be needed to seal areas that would otherwise be vulnerable. The embalmers approach these cases with the same care as any other, understanding that accident or violence in death doesn't diminish a person's worth or their right to proper preparation. Bodies of children present their own challenges. The techniques must be adjusted for smaller scale, gentler handling, different proportions. These are perhaps the most emotionally difficult cases, for even embalmers who have seen countless dead are moved by the waste of young life. They often take extra care with children's mummies, wrap them with particular tenderness, include extra protective amulets, hoping somehow to compensate for the short life they lived. Bodies of the very old are sometimes easier to work with, as they often carry less body fat and dry more quickly. But they also can be more fragile, the skin more prone to tearing, the bones more brittle. The embalmers must exercise gentle patience, working slowly, ensuring they don't cause any damage that would compromise the final appearance. Occasionally, a body comes to them that has been naturally preserved to some degree by the circumstances of death. Perhaps someone who died in the desert, and whose body was quickly desiccated by the sand and dry heat. Perhaps someone whose body was placed in Natron for storage by the family while they saved money for full treatment. These bodies are already partially preserved, and the embalmers adjust their process accordingly, building on the preservation that has already occurred. After 70 days, the embalmers present the completed mummy to the family. This is a moment of both sadness and satisfaction. The family sees their loved one transformed, no longer a decaying body, but a preserved form ready for eternity. The embalmers see the culmination of their work. Weeks of careful labor that have produced something worthy of the gods' attention. The family inspects the wrapping, admires the mask if there is one, examines the canopic jars with their precious contents. They pay the final portion of their fee, often adding a small extra amount as thanks for the quality of work. The embalmers help transfer the mummy to the coffin that has been waiting, working with the family to ensure everything is handled with proper respect. There are final prayers, final blessings. The embalmers invoke Anubis one last time, asking for his continued protection over the deceased as they journey into the next phase of their existence. They offer words of comfort to the family, assuring them that everything has been done correctly, that their loved one is well prepared for what lies ahead. The coffin is sealed, the mummy hidden from view, beginning its transition from the realm of the embalmers to the realm of the priests and tomb workers. The family departs, bearing their precious burden toward the tomb that awaits on the western bank, toward the final resting place, toward eternity. The embalmers clean their workspace once again. They purify their tools, dispose of the used natron and wrappings according to ritual practice, purify themselves in preparation for the next body that will come. The cycle continues, has continued for longer than anyone can remember, will continue for longer than anyone can imagine. In the evening, as the sun sets over the western cliffs, the embalmers return to their homes. They wash away the day's work, put on clean clothes, sit down to simple meals with their families. Tomorrow, they'll return to the workshop, and there will be another body waiting, another soul in need of their craft, another opportunity to practice their sacred art. The work never ends, but neither does its importance. As long as the Nile flows and Egypt endures, there will be death, and there will be embalmers ready to transform that death into something transcendent, something eternal. They are the quiet facilitators of the Egyptian dream of immortality, the practical practitioners of a sacred promise, the skilled hands that help souls journey from this life into the next. And as the darkness deepens and the stars emerge above the ancient land, we can imagine those embalmers resting, knowing they've done their part in maintaining the cosmic order, in honoring the dead, in serving the gods. Their work is both ordinary and extraordinary, both mundane and magical, both a craft and a calling. They are the embalmers of ancient Egypt, practitioners of the quiet craft of eternal preservation. And their legacy endures in every mummy that has survived into our modern age, a testament to their skill, their devotion, and their profound understanding of the human desire to transcend mortality. Rest well, and let the ancient rhythms of the Nile carry you gently into sleep.